reasonably brief. We had a good overview about what's happening in Shenzhen and the maker movement. I'd like to give you a very macro perspective of why all this is interesting and how we see the future playing out. Let me start by talking about some things that all of us have experienced here, living in Silicon Valley and perhaps in China as well. This is a timeline that goes back approximately 50 years and traces some of the major innovations and companies that have defined the technology ecosystem here in Silicon Valley and some of them in China. Approximately 50 years ago, Silicon Valley got started when the IC and semiconductor industry was invented. First by Fairchild, and then the Fairchildren, of which the largest became Intel, which came to dominate the semiconductor industry. Building on the innovations and the capabilities of the semiconductor industry, we began to have personal computers. In the 70s, started with Radio Shack, Apple, Commodore, and then subsequently the IBM PC and all the clones. At each of those times, those were very significant businesses. But they were small relative to the whole economy. When the PCs came along, they were driven from the user perspective by software. We had the emergence of companies at that time like Lotus, D-Base, and WordPerfect, if you're old enough to remember them, and of course Microsoft. To connect all of these computers together, we developed a networking and communications industry. Some of you may remember 3Com as a pioneer in this industry. And then subsequently, not only to connect networks, not only having networks of computers, but connecting networks of networks. That was where Cisco, right, and the wireless side, Qualcomm came along. And you see the two red names there, Lenovo and Huawei. Right? Lenovo, which used to be Legend Computer, subsequently acquired IBM's PC business, and then recently IBM's server business as well. And Huawei, which is now perhaps the largest and maybe the most significant, fastest growing certainly communications vendor in the world. On the base of personal computers interconnected together in the early 90s, where we added HTML to the mix and a browser. Right. What's a browser? We all know what a browser is. Back in 1994, nobody had heard of what a browser is. And that was the start of the internet. And over the next decade, we saw blossoming of some of the most significant companies that we recognize today, whether it's Google, or Yahoo, or Amazon, or eBay, or in China, Tencent, Baidu, and most recently last year in the IPO, Alibaba, the largest IPO in the world ever, right, in e-commerce. Apple, under Steve Jobs, redefined what they were doing, and in 2007, put the technologies embedded in the personal computer together, combined it with a very easy to use interface and a touch screen, and brought about the smartphone. Right? And the iPhone was really the first of what we think about smartphones today. And that in the last 7 years has completely redefined entire sectors and industries, leading to the development of some of the companies that have reached $1 billion in revenues in a record time, with some of the most valuable companies in the world, both Uber and Xiaomi from China, have achieved valuations in excess of $40 billion in the space of less than 5 years. So when you look at this, a couple of things strike me. These companies, the largest tech companies in the world, now some of the largest companies in the world, are dominated by companies from two countries. companies from the United States and the companies from China. And of the companies in the United States, a very large, disproportionate number of them are headquartered here in Silicon Valley. And the second thing is that each wave of innovation, often larger than faster growing the one before, is built on the innovations and enabled by the infrastructure that's provided by the prior generation of innovations. And so each wave of innovation is larger and grows faster than the previous one. So we set up GSR Ventures to bring what venture capital provided here in Silicon Valley to the companies in China. A source of funding, but more than funding, the advice and the connections and the assistance that will help 2 persons or 3 persons with an idea grow into a world-class large business. Let me turn to mobile because that's what we are in today. And we'll talk about that as a context for what we're looking at. Mobile is already much larger than the internet. This year, we shipped close to 1 billion smartphone devices. That's 2015. At the end of 2014, the number of mobile devices exceeded that of all PCs combined on the installed base basis. What is fascinating is that when you look at how the US dominates the PC era and the wave of technology innovation before, the US is much less dominant in mobile. This is just symptomatic. This expresses the number of cell phones, right, iOS devices, on a cumulative basis in the US and in China. In 2014, approximately 350 million smartphones were sold in China, more than the entire population of the United States. This has translated in a number of important applications as well. And this is just illustrative. I illustrate this with gaming because it turns out that the dominant application on gaming, on mobile phones, is games. Somewhere between 70 to 90%, depending on which country you're in, of all revenue from the App Store accrues to games. In Korea, Japan, it's 90%. In the US, it's about 70%. And China, in 2014, the size of the gaming market in China exceeded that in the US. The slide is made from last year. In 2013, it was still a little bit smaller. And this is seen across all the different sectors. Uber, on a global basis, has grown tremendously quickly, but their equivalents in China has somewhere between 5 and 10 times as much traffic or transactions as Uber does. The report last year was about 5 million requests a day for rides versus about 1 million requests on Uber. So Silicon Valley has led us for the last 50 years, has led early innovation and has continued to lead early innovation into the mobile era. But China has emerged as the largest market in the manufacturing center and the space where some of the largest companies in the world have emerged. Alibaba, for those of you who do not know, is valued at more than Amazon plus eBay, transacts more merchandise than Amazon plus eBay, and grows at over 50% a year versus about 20% a year for Amazon and eBay. Soon, Alibaba will transact more than twice the amount of merchandise in value that Amazon and eBay together will do. So China has, because it has some of the largest markets in the world, and has an ecosystem which is distinct from the US, and has emerged a culture and a group of people that have been able to drive innovation. Sometimes copying what's happening in the US, sometimes innovating themselves. And now, in the mobile space, perhaps neck to neck with the US, where innovations are happening at the same time on both sides. So where does that lead us after mobile? We're still investing in mobile startups. There are many, many mobile startups, and those of you living in San Francisco will be well aware of this, right? And those of us in China are also well aware of this. But as we look forward to the future, what is the next wave? Because there will be a next wave of innovation. Many of us think that possibly the most likely thing is the development of smart devices or ubiquitous computing devices. Some of the things that are defined by the Maker movement, by what was talked about before by Ness. These are often network devices, where the interaction with humans is an integral part but hidden and perhaps not explicit, where the devices are some awareness of what's happening and capable of autonomous operation. We have some promising early examples of how these work. Certainly some of the applications are smartphones and tablets. We have wearable devices like Fitbit, we have the home innovation devices like Nest and Hue, and smart cars like Tesla. If any of you have driven a Tesla, the experience using a Tesla is unlike that of any other car because it's a car that's always connected to the internet, right? And it's controllable by your device on your smartphone. And built on what has come before, pervasive, low-power wireless networks, sensors all over the place, microprocessors, and in the cloud, artificial intelligence and NLP, natural language processing, which allows these devices to interact with us. And we're now in CES, if you look at what's happening at CES this year, the Consumer Electronics Show, is not only about TVs, but all about connected devices. The car manufacturers are there, the home appliance companies are there, and they're all talking that they need to connect their devices, whether it's a car, a fridge, a coffee maker, or your clothes, or your watches, or your shoes. Right? There's a place to connect all of this to the internet. And as they get connected, we may yet have the single or the largest wave of innovation ever, measured perhaps in the trillions of dollars as opposed to the hundreds of billions of dollars that the mobile wave was measured in. And as we look forward to this, we can see this revolutionizing and completely changing the way we work, the way we live, whether it's at home or at work, with sensors that know how you are, your clothes that know when they need to be washed or need to be changed, that can tell what your state of health is. Are you hot? Are you cold? Right? And perhaps adjust to meet that changing environment. Our role as investors is to find the best of these companies and invest in them and help them become successful. It could be another decade, and this may not be it, because sometimes we're wrong. A decade ago, our industry thought that energy was the new frontier. Some people thought some time ago that AI, 20 years ago, we thought artificial intelligence was it. And we've been wrong before. But it certainly looks as if we are onto something that has real utility, that could make a real difference in this world. And this is a space where I think uniquely bringing together what happens here, the ideas, the people, and the thinking in Silicon Valley with the capabilities of manufacturing, rapid prototyping, and the ability to scale up and build these devices in volume very rapidly that exists in China, particularly Shenzhen, will be important. Thank you.
Okay, so if I could have Leslie Liao join us on stage.